Well, this morning I have with me at the South Devon Book Festival local author Madeline Dyer. So Madeline, welcome to the South Devon Book Festival on this rather dreary Saturday morning.
Thank you, thanks. I'm so excited to be here, even if we did get caught in torrential rain when we were coming in.
Yes, the weather is not fun this morning, but moving on to your writing. So if anybody hasn't actually heard of you, just tell our audience, who is Madeline Dyer? What sort of genres of fiction do you cover, or non-fiction?
So I cover a wide variety of fiction so easily. So I've got fantasy, I've got dystopian, horror, dark contemporary, science fiction. And then under a pen name of Ellen Annalise, I also started writing rom-coms and sort of slightly darker romance, but also sort of what I call social studies fiction.
So does your writing have a sort of social commentary stance to it when you were saying about writing social studies sort of fiction?
Sorry,
yeah, I very much think it does. I'm very interested in sort of how people interact with each other, the psychology behind sort of when people make different decisions, what it means to be human. So that's very much a through line of all of my work, regardless of genre.
I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about that in a minute because of the latest work that you've just released in October of this year, which is quite interesting. But as you're a multi-genre author, are you published or self-published?
I am both. So some of my books are traditionally published and some are self-published under my own imprint. The self-publishing came about because I was with an American publisher sort of in 2015, 2016, and then they closed and I was only sort of midway through my series. So I wanted to really finish the series and get it out there for readers, so I self-published the rest of that series and then I just kept doing both routes.
So what do you find that being self-published means that you have a lot more ownership over the work that you do create, such as being, say, with a traditional publisher who might have very fixed ideas about what you can and can't write?
Yeah, so ownership is quite a big one for me because when I write any sort of manuscript, I get kind of possessive of it and I very much want it to stay in its current form. Even when I'm self-publishing and I have 100% creative control, I do work with editors and some of them are the same editors that my traditionally published work goes through via the publisher. But you definitely get more creative control with the self-publishing. I'm lucky with my traditional publishing that I have an agent who is very sort of confident in what I think, and she's not very editorial herself. She just says to me, get the manuscript in the exact shape that you want it, and then I will pitch it and we'll try and get a publisher who shares the same vision as you.
So is it all about having a good agent and a good editor as well?
I think so, yeah. So my current agent is actually my third agent. My first agent, we just didn't really gel well with the different genres because she wanted me to write more science fiction, and at that point I was more interested in sort of dark contemporary. And then my second agent, she was more into just anthologies, didn't really want any of my novels. So now I've got my third agent who is just so excited by whatever I have to write, and she's very sort of sales and business orientated, which really helps for me. And finding a right editor and self-publishing, it's really good because you can literally decide who you want to use, whereas if a publisher is giving you an editor, you have no choice.
And I guess having a good relationship and a good rapport with your editor is also part of the process too.
Definitely, yeah, because there will be parts where the editor is saying, oh, I want this subplot changed, or we need to cut out 20,000 words, and a lot of the time it's about picking which battles I really want to fight them upon. If I have a good rapport with them, then I can often sort of talk to them a bit more, find out why they're saying this needs to change in that particular way, and really sort of work from there. So a lot of it is about sort of building these really strong relationships across the publishing industry.
That's quite an insightful way, and you've given some very good advice to people who may want to go down the traditional or the self-published. I mean, you said earlier on that you started working with an American publisher. Are your audiences different in the United Kingdom, say, to perhaps an American audience? Do you have to pitch your stories or write for two slightly different audiences, or have they been quite well received, your novels, across in this country and in America?
Yeah, I think pretty much my audience is pretty similar across the US and the UK. I sort of have trained myself to write in American English, which is now really annoying for me because my latest series, which book one is Callie Harper and the Graveside Murder, that is a children's story set on Dartmoor, based on Dartmoor legends. So I then almost had to relearn how to write in British English, which sounds ridiculous when I am British, but it's just things like phraseology, like toward versus towards, and just little things like that. Like one of them says like I haven't got, the other one is I don't have, one of those is UK, one of those is US, and it's just making sure that I'm actually using the right phraseology depending on the audience.
Nothing like keeping you on your toes, definitely, as a writer, and for your editors as well. But and earlier on in our talk, you said that you've written across many different genres, including fantasy, dystopian, horror, all genres of fiction that are don't show any signs of slowing down. So when you start on a new writing project, what guides you to the particular genre that you're going to start writing on? Is it things that you see, things that you observe? Because people might be interested, well, why do you not just stick to one particular genre?
Yeah, so I tend to write multiple genres at the same time, so I always have like 4 or 5 manuscripts on the go at once, and each one will be a distinct genre within itself, because if I'm trying to write, say, 2 horror manuscripts at the same time, I will get those mixed up. So I always tend to have sort of a contemporary, a romance, horror, and then either like dystopian, science fiction or fantasy on the go at any one time. And it's really difficult to say like what draws me to a specific genre. I guess it's more like how I'm feeling on a particular day, like my mood kind of dictates which manuscript I go to. But I don't plan any of my stories at all. I always just sit down, write and see what happens. So then sometimes I do get very sort of like genre mashups, like my dystopian book Fragmented ended up becoming a very sort of dystopian fantasy, which I did not realise at the time when I started writing it, but it was just where the story wanted to go, and it was what kept me interested in it, really.
And you were saying about your novel Callie Harper and the Graveside Murder, writing for children. When you say children, are you talking about the young adult genre?
So that one, Callie Harper and the Graveside Murder, is my first middle grade novel, so that is aimed at children that are 9 to 12 years old. And I found it so difficult at first writing for middle grade because I'm very much a young adult and adult author. And I just found there were so many new rules and almost limitations that I had when writing for children. My editor, Cathy Dodds, was really helpful with that because she just sat me down and she was like, you've written this plot, but you've written it as if it's a young adult plot. And she pointed out so many things to me, like you can't have a child in a middle grade novel getting injured or a threat of injury, whereas in a young adult novel, you can have teenagers even being murdered, and that's deemed as acceptable. So it was quite a big learning curve in learning how to write for children.
And I'm guessing that you can't, I mean, just the title in itself, Callie Harper and the Graveside Murder, in itself, just the word murder, I'm guessing for a 9-year-old, you've got to give enough detail, but not enough so that they're too frightened that they'll have nightmares after they've read it.
Exactly, it's a fine balance, and the Graveside Murder in the Vincent book actually refers to the Dartmoor legend of Kitty J's grave.
Oh yes, of course, where the flowers get put on.
Yeah.
And there's a mysterious bunch of flowers left there every day, and a very, very well-known Dartmoor folklore story.
Yeah, exactly. So the murder, you don't see any murder happening on page. They see the body, and I've done a slight retelling of Kitty J's murder, where it is murder rather than a suicide, because writing about suicide just wouldn't be appropriate for children. Whereas we do get a lot of children's murder mysteries where children become the detectives. So I've really focused on that, and my main character learns that she is from an ancient line of Dartmoor witches. So a lot of it's about her finding what her powers are, working out who she is, coming to terms with this new identity where she's now got to solve a historical murder, and there are lots of ghosts in the book.
That's such an interesting retelling of a Dartmoor legend. It's all about witchcraft and wizardry, and this is the first book in the series.
It is. I'm hard at work on the second book now, which I think will probably release sort of November next year. And yeah, just getting my teeth into that one at the moment.
And I'm going to be now moving on to talking about your latest work released last month called These Bodies Ain't Broken, which is a collection of 13 different stories featuring disabled people in horror situations. And to give some examples, there are someone with Crohn's, PTSD, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, disabilities that may not necessarily be spoken, some seen, some hidden. And as an author, was that quite a controversial idea to sort of run with, having disabled people in horror situations?
So, to give a bit of background, as a teenager, I started reading a lot of horror, and I was drawn to body horror because I have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, and I have a condition that causes brain inflammation, which then causes periods where I have like psychosis, loss of balance, loss of movement. So there have been times where I've been in the hospital for like weeks at a time. And I was drawn to body horror because it was the only genre where I could consistently see sort of disabled bodies. Right. But I noticed that in almost all of these horror stories, it was the villain who was disabled. And it was almost like said like, oh, it's okay that they are disabled because they are evil. So I really wanted to challenge that because it was just really getting to me. And I wanted to be able to see someone with a disability like mine on page, but where they were flourishing, where they were winning. So I pitched this idea to my agent. I was like, I want to put together an anthology where every main character is disabled. I want all the authors that are writing these stories to also have that disability, because I think authentic representation is so important, so that you're not perpetuating harm with any sort of inadvertent stereotypes. And I really wanted it to be sort of a mainstream book as well, that would be marketed to sort of everyone rather than just people with disabilities. And my agent was really enthusiastic. The publisher loved it and like picked it up straight away, which I was so happy with. And this is actually the first horror anthology to only feature characters with disability, chronic illness, invisible illnesses, and mental illnesses. And I'm just so happy by the reception that it's had.
I can really resonate with that because myself being registered blind, you often find that the blind person is either extremely weak and helpless and really grossly underrepresented and in a really negative way, or they're suddenly hit with a mystical spirit and they suddenly have their sight restored. And I guess with this one it's really nice to see disabled people just getting on with it and also raising awareness of conditions such as yourself. I mean, if anybody is curious, do you mind explaining what Ehlers-Danlos syndrome is?
Sure, so it's a genetic condition that affects the development of the connective tissue. There are a number of subtypes of it, so I've got type 3, which manifests as frequent dislocations. I regularly dislocate my left knee, I have to use crutches. It also affects my blood vessels, so my blood vessels are too stretchy, so I'm prone to then fainting, and it's caused dysautonomia in me as well, so I do get seizures as well with it. Pretty much everyone who has Ehlers-Danlos in some way, their manifestations of it are slightly different because there are such a wide range of symptoms that it can contribute to. So it can also be a really tricky diagnosis to actually get because anyone can present it in a different way. So I had my first dislocation when I was 12 years old, although when I was born, one of my legs was twisted around the wrong way, but doctors didn't realise at that point. They were just like, oh, she's probably not going to walk, and that was all that they said. I defied their expectations, did a lot of gymnastics, ballet, which strengthened my muscles and helped it, but then by the time I got to 12, with all the hormone changes, I just found that I was dislocating regularly at that point. But it wasn't until I was 19 when I got the diagnosis of Ehlers-Danlos syndrome.
Well, what you've done with this novel and this anthology of short stories is that it showed disabled people doing something positive and being the hero rather than challenging this outdated misconception that the disabled person is the villain and something to be feared, but actually showing people just getting on with it and raising awareness of conditions that may not necessarily be talked about, and raising unseen disabilities as well. So you've got a number of projects coming out in 2026, so what's on the horizon for you now then?
So I think my first release in 2026 is a science fiction novel called The Replica. That is one of my favourite ones. I kind of see it as a bit like Orphan Black meets Black Mirror. If any of you are into stuff like TV, radio shows like that, I'm really excited by that one. And then after that I've got a novella in a dystopian anthology called Future States of Stars. My novella is called Vista of the World, and it's about a world where carnivorous plants take over as a retaliation of how people have tried to control plants in their garden and keep them tamed for hundreds of years. So it's looking at what happens when plants finally fight back. I've got another anthology releasing in May 2026 called Being Arrow, which is the sequel to Being Ace, which was a Lambda Literary Award finalist. And then finally, in the winter of 2026, I've got another horror anthology releasing, which is called what's it called? These Ghastly Depths. That's what it's called. It recently had a title change and then just got announced last week. And that is all ocean gothic anthology about monsters under the sea.
Gosh, you've got a very busy year coming up then in 2026. It's amazing you have any spare time at all with all these projects that you've got on the go. So if anybody wants to find out any more about your writing, are all your books available online and in all good bookshops?
They are, yeah, so you can get them sort of on Amazon, Waterstones, you can order them in. I've even seen copies of these bodies they've broken on Waterstones stores in their shelves, which is really exciting. But yeah, all the usual places, all the good bookshops, they can get them.
Well, Madeline Dyer, it's been so lovely to meet you this morning, and thank you for giving up your time and coming to the South Devon Book Festival, and we wish you all the very best for 2026, and I hope you have a lovely Christmas and a successful selling today at the South Devon Book Festival.
Thank you so much.
Many thanks for your time.
Thanks. It's lovely meeting you.
And you too. Take care.